On today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, I don't think Gary Bettman is going to send Alex Mereulo a Christmas card this year.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. We are your team every day, and we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. On today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, we react to the news that Marc-Andre Fleury will be back for one last ride in Minnesota as he signs a one-year extension to stay with the Wild. We'll talk about the retirement tour. We'll talk about whatever that press conference was with Alex Mereulo and Gary Bettman, because Gary Bettman is not subtle about visual cues when Alex Mereulo is talking. And we'll also take a look at the opening round of Western Conference playoff games, some of the things that stood out through the game one for every series so far. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, one half of the dynamic duo here for Western Conference Tuesday, and joined by Nick Morgan of Locked On Predators. We do actually get along, despite what, if we had a press conference like Gary Bettman and Alex Mereulo did, I think we would get along just fine. But
it would probably be to revamp the playoff format.
Yes.
I gotta feel like it's you, me, and Gary Bettman right in the middle, and you and me are like sunglasses and Hawaiian shirts, being like, "This is what we're going. It's what we're going to do now."
And Gary would just be beaming and saying, "Thank you, gentlemen, for coming up with this great idea that we feel like is really going to enrich the Stanley Cup playoffs here for our wonderful league."
Yeah, something like that.
We'll talk more about whatever that was between Mereulo and Gary Bettman here in a little bit. But some big news on the Minnesota front, Nick, to start us off, as Marc-Andre Fleury is coming back. 1 year, $2.5 million. He will be back for one final season with the Minnesota Wild. And it's ironic, the timetable for this, and this is something that I can speak to a little bit, obviously covering the Minnesota Wilds. Michael Russo doing a nice deep dive into this, because Marc-Andre Fleury was pretty set like 6 weeks before this happened that he was done. He was pretty set that this was going to be it.
Well, wasn't he doing like farewell tours? Like, didn't he specifically sit out of the Pittsburgh game because he didn't want to do a farewell? Didn't he do like a big thing in Montreal?
Yeah,
like,
there were.
I feel like he had a farewell tour a little bit here.
It was an unofficial type retirement tour where teams were just saying, well, hey, if this is it, thanks for the memories.
Yeah.
And so a 6-week timetable in which he started to play some real good hockey. And honestly, got to give a little credit to Brandon Duhaime for the prank war that those two have been on for the entirety of the season. Feel like that kind of got the juices flowing, but basically, as Fleury laid it out, he still loves to compete. He still loves to be in the thick of it with his teammates, the camaraderie, the battle level, the prank wars. All of that has led him to want to come back for one final season. Honestly, I'm here for it. I think Marc-Andre Fleury is going to go down as one of the greatest. He already is. Mm-hmm. And so one final year to watch him do his thing, I'm very much in favor of that.
Yeah, and it also seems like, you know, at this point too, it's if Fleury's not back in Minnesota, what are the other options? because you have Filip Gustavsson locked up for at least another couple of years beyond this one. And he himself kind of, seemed a little bit shaky there. So I'm not sure what that situation was. It seems like they're going to be patient with Jesper Wallstedt, which, I get the sense that you agree with that. I agree with that. There's no need to rush him in, especially, behind a Minnesota Wild defense that was kind of shaky at times. So, you don't really have the cap space to go out and swing for a top level goalie. So, from a hockey standpoint, I think we're past the point of calling Marc-Andre Fleury like a game-changing goaltender.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't going to help or hurt the Wild's cup chances at all. But at the same time, if you're Minnesota, you've got a young team. Why not just lock up, somebody who's been a solid veteran backup, get through the year, get through this last sort of remnants of cap hell from the Parise and Suter buyouts, and then just see where you're at, next summer. So I don't hate this for Minnesota at all.
Yeah, and honestly, I think the player who should be most worried about this is Filip Gustavsson. The Wild have been a little critical of Filip Gustafsson's conditioning through the course of his early career so far, and his consistency level last year was non-existent. He basically alternated good and bad starts all season. So he is, I think, being put on notice to, if you can figure it out and can get back to the level that we saw 2 years ago, because, let's keep that in mind, too. 2 years ago, he was like the third best goalie in the entirety of the NHL, statistically. And so the Wilds are going to go into the season with leaving this essentially fully up to Filip Gustavsson as to which type of goalie he wants to be. If he shows out similar to what he did 2 years ago, he's going to stay. If he doesn't, Bill Guerin is going to send him somewhere, because you only get so many opportunities with a team. And this is a Wild team. We've seen them kind of cut bait on players that have some types of issues. Jordan Greenway was late to a meeting last 2 years ago, whatever season it was that he was traded. Honestly, they all melt together. So I'm pretty sure it was 2 years ago. Was late to a meeting before a game against the St. Louis Blues. He got traded like a week later. So Bill Guerin doesn't mess around with this stuff. If he tells you to do something and you don't do it, you're not going to be on the team for long. So there are two scenarios. If Gustafsson gets back on track, it'll be Fleury and Gustafsson most of the season. And then Fleury retires, and then it'll be Gustafsson and Jesper next year. If Gustafsson doesn't get it figured out, then he's going to get traded, and Jesper will take that spot in the lineup. And you mean to tell me right now that the New Jersey Devils would not be screaming to try to make that happen with as dire as their goalie situation is right now? I think they would answer the phone, and I think they would pay you whatever you asked for.
Yeah. It seems like for Minnesota, this is a deal that lets you kick the can down the road.
Correct.
A little bit, because you don't have to make that decision right now. And I think that's the key point in bringing Marc-Andre Fleury back, is that you have now two goalies locked up for next year.
Yeah.
And you don't have to make a decision on Filip Gustavsson right now, because if you make that decision, that probably means you're going to have to go out and make a move for somebody in the summer, whether that's for a trade, whether that's, picking up a free agent. And that also means you're going to have to make a decision on Jesper Wallstedt right now. Is he ready to be in the NHL? Do we want to give him 1A minutes or 1B minutes? Do we feel comfortable with him being a backup? Would we rather have him in the AHL? You get to kick that can down the road a little bit. And look, Minnesota, honestly have much bigger fish to fry at the moment, as
Thank
I'm
you.
sure you can attest to, Seth, than the two goaltenders in net. So with all that in mind, there's probably going to be some changes this summer. So having a bit of stability in net, not a bad thing at all.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it too. That's a fantastic point. Is let's lock in what is probably lowest on our priority list. Let's just lock that in, get that taken care of so we can push it off to the side and worry about the other things. That's 100% what this is too.
Yeah, for sure.
So we'll see how it plays out. I mean, obviously injuries can change any situation. And so now the Wild have 3 goalies to play with. If somebody gets hurt, they can go to the other. We'll see. But Flower is back in the NHL for one final season. He is definitive. This will be it. So enjoy it, folks, because this is the last bit of Marc-Andre Fleury magic that we will get. Speaking of magic, Gary Bettman and Alex Mereulo were at the same table giving a press conference, and the vibes between the two could not have been different. Oh my gosh, we have a ton to break down from this. I'm not even talking about the subject matter. I'm just talking about the performance art of the Gary Bettman, Alex Mereulo press conference. We'll talk about that as we continue today's episode of Locked On NHL after this. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by Game Time. We are getting into the spring, which means baseball season is here. And if you want to go enjoy your favorite Major League Baseball team in the wonderful weather, or if you want to try to hop into the Stanley Cup Playoffs or the NBA Playoffs, you know the hassle that same-day ticket buying can often bring. Game Time, however, is here to take all of those stresses and throw them completely out the window and allow you to focus on the things that you should, which is enjoying whichever event you are headed to. Game Time offers flash deals, all-in pricing, plus a panoramic view of what your vantage point will be from the seats that you buy. Game Time also offers their lowest price guarantee. If you find tickets that are cheaper, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. Once again, we are your team every day. Seth Toupal and Nick Morgan here on your Western Conference Tuesday. Nick, there has been a lot of discussion about the now Utah to be named Laters because everything has been agreed to. Board of Governors voted yes to relocating the Arizona Coyotes to Utah. There was a press conference with Alex Mereulo and Gary Bettman to explain how the Arizona portion of this works going forward. And I have never seen somebody exude such just overall distaste for another human being the way Gary Bettman did for Alex Mereulo through the entirety of that press conference. Like, I can only imagine what that would have looked like had there not been cameras present, because Gary Bettman has had enough of Alex Mereulo, plain and simple. Like, the moment that their obligations are done, Gary Bettman will cease to operate with Alex Mereulo. He just, he was eye rolling. He was cutting him off. He was telling him, I've answered that question. You don't have to. Oh my gosh, that was aggressive.
I'm trying to think of some kind of press conference equivalent, like from a movie, TV show. All I can think of was like Iron Man, where they're like giving him like a list of points and he just like kicks back, like kicks his feet up on the desk. Like, I'm just picturing like a YOLO vibe here.
Honestly, the in Captain America Civil War, where they are announcing the Sokovia Accords and Tony is sitting in the chair while Steve Rogers is talking and he's just going like this. Honestly, that probably tracks pretty accurately.
Yeah. It's if you're an owner and that's basically your boss, Gary Bettman, if you're having a press conference to the media, don't you think you two should like talk about what your answers are going to be? Like what your stances are going to be? Like Alex Mereulo basically kind of taking the line of, we did a lot of things right and we were close and we did this. And then Gary Bettman coming back and be like, oh, I don't actually, here's our point of view on it. Totally different than what this guy just said. It was a mess, and it sort of highlighted just the dysfunction of this whole Arizona saga with ownership. I get, and it sounds like Alex Mereulo is going to have the rights to bring hockey back to Arizona if he wants to re-up the Coyotes franchise in 5 years. But I gotta ask, like, does the NHL trust him?
No.
Like let's say out of some miracle, like this is the guy who does land an arena deal in Phoenix. And it seems like he couldn't do it in 3 other cities. So I don't know what confidence you have there. Like, let's say he lands an arena deal and brings the Coyotes franchise back. Is that the guy you really want running the show? Like, are the rest of the owners going to be like, oh, yeah, the guy who bungled hockey in our 4th biggest U.S. media market? Yeah, that's who we want to, like, redo this.
No, and I wonder, too, like, I feel really, really bad for Arizona fans because it's evident, like, they show up. When the team gives them a reason to cheer and to be loud and to show up to games, they do. But it feels to me like the NHL, because what is it? It's a 5-year window to be able to get an expansion franchise if Mereulo can get a stadium deal put together. That's the parameters, right?
Right.
The NHL is going to try to move this to 5 years and a day with everything in their power. Like it feels to me like Gary Bettman wants nothing to do with Alex Mereulo. And that could just be that press conference and okay, we're finally getting to the end of this saga. I'm tired of talking to you, lose my number.
Yeah.
But it does feel like, because there just were some very interesting things that took place during that press conference too. When Mereulo announced, like, I hate the media.
At the beginning of your press conference to the media.
And it's like, I quote tweeted that and I said, well, it is, I feel like it's a 2-way street. But he's somebody who has not done a lot of press. And Ryan Smith, in the first hour that he was the owner of the Utah to be named Laters, he did more press work than Mereulo has done in like however long he's owned the team.
Yeah.
Like, you get good press as an owner if you are open to the press.
And here's the other thing, about Ryan Smith in the Utah situation was every kind of, I guess, like devil's advocate, any kind of question that came out, he was ready for it. He had an answer for it. Somebody been like, hey, we had a hockey game at Delta Center in Salt Lake City, and it was terrible. There's no sight lines. Like, it wasn't built for hockey. And he's like, yeah, we know, but here's what we're going to do. We already have funding lined up to redo the arena. Or, it's simple stuff like that, where he kind of had an answer and a plan for everything. You talk to Alex Mereulo over the past, 5-6 years, however long this saga has been going on, And it's kind of been all like, in the corporate world, we call it like a rah-rah speech.
Yep.
Where there's like a lot of buzzwords, a lot of, yeah, we're going to rise up. We're going to figure this out. We're going to bring hockey back to the desert. And it's like, oh, but how? We're going to bring hockey to the desert.
Yeah.
We're building an arena.
We'll figure that out later.
Yeah. We don't really want the arena here. You're probably going to get some pushback. No, everybody wants it. Let's all get on board. And it's just like, these guys in Salt Lake have a plan. They have contingencies for all these things. They've already got funding. And so, yeah, like it's just, they've had all their ducks in a row. And as you mentioned, like they've been very open with the media. I mean, obviously like you kind of have to sell your team, but
yeah,
it's just night and day, like kind of different approaches to this.
Ryan Smith also didn't say that he retained all of the creative, like licensing and entities for the Arizona Coyotes. He just dumped all the players and the staff in Utah. Like,
yeah,
that feels like that probably should have been said any number of other ways. But
there's a lot of things that should have gone. Real quick, do you have a favorite team name for Utah?
Honestly, I have been going with, it plays off of the Utah Jazz a little bit. It's not going to be, it won't be the pick, but for some reason, I keep going back to the Utah Rock.
Utah Rock.
Because you got the Utah Jazz. Why not have the Utah Rock too?
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
You could do like 80s. You could do like 80s night. Your mascot could be like just an acid guitar, like an acid rock electric guitarist. I don't know. I feel like it will be something. It's going to be something that plays into the history of Salt Lake.
Yeah.
And the fandom there.
Apparently, according to Fox 13 in Salt Lake City, the betting favorite is Blizzard, Utah Blizzard, which seems very close to Avalanche. Let's just say that.
Yeah, that feels like a direct. Although honestly, if you want to build up a massive rivalry between those two teams, that'd be a good way to do it.
Yeah. What do you call them? Snowplows? Utah snowplows?
We're going to go
Utah controlled blasts.
I just about said something that would have gotten me in a lot of trouble that I'll tell you when we are done recording, but I'm not going to repeat it.
And then I will put it out on Twitter. So.
I just about got myself in a whole heap of trouble by what I was going to say, but thankfully I caught myself and we're just going to move on. Like we are just going to up and leave to the next to the final segment where we talk about what we saw from the opening games of round one. Couple of games going on as we record, but there was a full weekend of games in the West. Some surprises, including that Winnipeg, Colorado game. We'll talk about that as we finish today's episode of Locked On NHL after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It is playoff time in the NHL and in the NBA. Not only that, but baseball is in full swing. We got soccer going, a lot of great sports. And FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game out there. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Today's episode is also brought to you by Policy Genius. Policy Genius is the country's leading online life insurance marketplace. It saves you time and money so you can provide your family with financial safety net starting today. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million worth of coverage. Some options give same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams so you can get your coverage faster. Policy Genius also helps you compare your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts are always on hand to help you walk through your options. You can talk to a team of award-winning agents who will walk you through the process step by step, and they'll help you easily compare quotes for America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. So check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL or click the link in our show description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. Again, that's policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL.
Welcome back to today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. Once again, we are your team every day, and we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. Western Conference Tuesday edition of Locked On NHL. Let's get to the playoff games, Nick, because we saw the opening bit of the Western Conference playoffs this weekend. 2 games in progress as we record, but I think the 4 that we saw are enough to discuss for today. Honestly, the biggest surprise for me, the Winnipeg Jets were able to win in what will likely be the worst start of the postseason for Connor Hellebuyck.
Yes. And that's key too, because Colorado's offense, we know what they can do. We know they're swarming. Connor Hellebuyck did not have a good game. You know, we can talk about Colorado putting constant pressure, but some of those goals are just not goals we're used to seeing Connor Hellebuyck give up. But luckily for him, the goalie hit the other end of the ice was way worse than Connor Hellebuyck. And if you're Colorado, you maybe look at that as sort of a missed opportunity.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Because look, we know Connor Hellebuyck. Unfortunately, both of us have seen enough Winnipeg Jets games to know that he doesn't have those kind of performances often. Are you going to put up 6 goals on him again with a better goaltending performance from your guys? I don't think so. And so you kind of got what you wanted. Like, you got to him. You had him in a position where he was going to actually lose a goaltending battle, but Gorgiev couldn't, pull the trigger. And now Colorado is in a 1-0 hole. And I'm as good as that Colorado offense is, I can rest assure you, I don't think Hellebuyck is going to be that bad for any game the rest of the series.
I agree, because he's going to take that personal. And so there is a chance that this flips to where Colorado doesn't score 6 goals the rest of the series. Like, that's how dynamically he can flip things to where honestly, the goalie matchup was the biggest question mark heading into this series. Even more so than how will Winnipeg's offense keep up with Colorado? Because if you're Colorado, where do you go now? Like, you have Gorgiev, you have Justus Anunen, who is ill and is likely not available. What do you do? Like, you have to hope. You have to hope that Gorgiev wakes up from this and is able to turn it around, because if not, I don't know what you do.
Pray, Seth.
Pretty much. So that was the most surprising game of the opening night for me. The only other one, because the other 2 are going on again as we speak, the only other one was your Nashville Predators taking on the Vancouver Canucks. I guess the surprise for me was the bounce back by Vancouver, because it looked for a while like what we had kind of expected to play out was going to. That Vancouver was a little on the nervous side with this being their first playoff action at home in, like, I think it was 9 years.
Yeah.
it
since
looks like
2019. Or, I'm
that
sorry,
was
2015.
it looked like that was going to be how things played out in game one. But then 2 goals in about 15 seconds completely turned the tide in that game. And all of a sudden, then Vancouver was able to go from now we got to steal one on the road to we found just enough room to grab momentum and not give it back.
And if you're Nashville, that's a missed opportunity as well.
Yep.
Because you had a situation where you were prone to go out on the road and take a win from Vancouver. This is going to be an interesting series, Seth, because when you look at the matchups on paper, these were the 2 teams that were like you kind of look at and say, records aside and placement aside, these teams are kind of evenly matched on paper.
Yeah.
Kind of even in terms of the offensive statistics, kind of even in terms of, the defensive metrics. Obviously, there's a couple differences. I think Vancouver has more depth. But at the same time, you're like, you could conceivably make a case for either team winning this series. I think that even though Vancouver got that win, I think Nashville proved that they're right in it. I think they proved that they can handle that high speed style of play that Vancouver likes to play. Andy Burnett has kind of morphed the Preds into a team that's that similar style. This is easily going to be a series in which 1 or 2 bounces are going to dictate which way momentum goes. The Predators were on the wrong end of that the other night, but who knows? Game 2 tonight, Tuesday, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Preds go back. I will say, as a Preds fan, it feels like tonight is the series.
Yeah.
A little bit, because if you go down 2-0, even if you win the next 2 in Nashville, that's a big steep hill to come by.
Well, and we saw the theme in the Eastern Conference in game 2 was the team that loses game 1 comes storming back. Now, for Toronto, it ended up being a win for them. For the New York Islanders, they found, I don't know how they lost that game, to be honest. Like, they had a 3-1 lead, and then the next thing I know, Carolina scored an empty net, and then all of a sudden they won by 2. I don't understand that. That's for tomorrow. That's for Eastern Conference Wednesday.
I cannot wait to hear the breakdown of the Islanders having 12 shots on goal.
Oh, man.
12 shots on goal in a playoff game.
That's a tough scene. That's a very tough scene.
Yeah.
The other surprise, I guess, and we can talk about this even though the game is still going on, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Stone not only returned, but he also scored.
Yeah. That was the most convenient injury timing. It is a modern day miracle how the Vegas Golden Knights players always seem to heal right as the playoffs begin. Wow, that is a very strong coincidence that has happened multiple years in a row now.
I'd like to get the Vegas Golden Knights team doctor on camera to be like, we did medicals 3 weeks ago, and it looked like the earliest return date for him was going to be 8 months from now. And all of a sudden, he miraculously healed and is able to play.
Yeah.
Full clearance, full contact. Oh, and then he scores the first goal of the game for the Vegas Golden Knights. Are you kidding me?
Looks like he has been full go for like 2 months now.
No rust. Like he just looks better than ever.
I picture the team doctor like, it's like 8 weeks out to the playoff start, and like Alec Martinez walks up and it's like, oh, you have a sprained knee? What's the timetable on that? 4 to 6 weeks? All right, check back in 1 month and we'll start your treatment.
Like the team doctor for the Vegas Golden Knights is just the wizard from the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. It's all these people have season-ending injuries, and then like Jesus walks in the door and then just, miraculously heals everybody at once. And then I guess floats out onto the Vegas Strip somewhere.
I mean, if the Vegas Golden Knights team doctor wants to also visit Minnesota, I would not be upset.
Yeah. If he would like to visit my house and bless me with this month's lottery numbers,
yeah,
that's fine too.
I got a shoulder blade thing that I've been dealing with for like 3 months that is not fun. I would like to have that looked at too. Like,
well, you made my thing sound way more selfish than yours. I was like, you're like, yeah, I need a legitimate injury healed. Like I'm in a lot of pain right now. And I'm like, I just want to go to Cancun for a week, man.
Well, I mean, I think he could. I think he'd be able to handle both. Like,
yeah, there we go.
Let's be honest here. There's some sort of witchcraft going on here that just continues to happen. I don't know if there is a voodoo doll involved. I don't know what's going on, but Mark Stone just continues to do it. That it's the Aaron Paul in Breaking Bad. He can't keep getting away with it gif just in perpetuity. And it happened again, and Vegas is probably going to ride it to Stanley Cup championship. Who knows?
Of course they are.
We'll see. We will talk more about the opening round of the playoffs next week because obviously we'll have plenty more games that will happen between now and then. And I guess we'll just wait and see what Alex Mereulo says next, or who Gary Bettman does a press conference with that he can't stand. These are all things that we'll keep an eye on between now and next week's edition of Western Conference Tuesday, Locked On NHL. So make sure so you don't miss out. You subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms. Drop a like on this video as well. And we will continue to keep you updated through the rest of the week with our wide array of hosts here on Locked On NHL, whether it be Eastern Conference Wednesday, Western Conference Tuesday, At Large Monday, Power Rankings Thursday, or more at-large NHL coverage on Friday. We have you covered all week long with new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.